Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is L. Lauren, and I am the author of the story you're about to listen to. This week's story is Avid Reader, which is the fourth and currently final book in the Gallant Hearts series. The other three books are Black Sheep, Favorite Son, and Good Neighbor. This story has the themes Opposites Attract, Protector, and Military. Like the other stories in this series, thanks to the YouTube algorithm, this is the clean version of the story. The raw and unedited version will be up on Patreon soon. I will let you guys know when that is. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the story.
Avid Reader. L. Lauren. Chapter 1. Ray. Ray Campbell looked over the security reports from the weekend as he headed to the conference room to give his morning security briefing for Worthington Limited. Things should have been blissfully quiet with the new CEO on vacation. Marcus Worthington himself wasn't an issue within the company, but his new promotion to the head of the company and the elder Worthington's retirement kept everyone in the building on their toes while they tried to impress the new boss. Sadly, when his boss returned, Ray would be one more man down in security. Along with the two he just lost, one to incompetence and one to a better job, Ray was facing the loss of Jack Boynton, who managed to bag himself the new CEO as a lover and as a private bodyguard client. As soon as Mr. Worthington was back in the office, Ray needed to meet with him and with Jack to determine the command structure. Was Ray to take his orders from Jack in regards to the CEO's security while in the building? Or would Jack report to him? It was all up in the air, and Ray didn't like it when things were up in the air. He thumbed through the briefing folder. According to the vacation schedule, Mr. Worthington was due back in the office that morning. Looked like he was requesting that meeting sooner than he anticipated. Passing by reception, the night shift was winding down and patiently, if not somewhat sleepily, waiting for their relief. "Should be a short meeting this morning, guys," Ray said, tapping the reception desk with his folder. "Sit tight." "Yes, sir," they all said and started the end-of-shift routine to pass off to the day shift. The lobby was still quiet, the floors waxed to a mirror shine, waiting for the start of the day in the Monday morning rush. It was times like this that Ray missed being a grunt on a security rotation. Do his time on the night shift and go home. Now he was the boss, with all the responsibility that came with it, and stuck on days with no time to jerk around. He stepped into the briefing room and closed the door. All right. Some issues over the weekend to watch out for. The meeting, as promised, didn't take long. Ray ran a tight department. He kept his finger on the pulse of everything that went on in the building, day and night. With that efficiency came tedium and boredom. He had trained his men well, making his job that much easier as far as workflow was concerned. Aside from being short 3 men, that is. It wouldn't be the same without Jack there. He'd grown used to having his close friend around. Still, all things considered, Ray consistently recruited new talent from veterans coming out of the service. His second-in-command, Bill Tompkins, fell into step with Ray as he headed for his office. "Don't you ever get bored of the same old around here? If you're asking me if I miss cold nights on foot patrol with sore feet, sore back and a piece of 7-pound steel slung over a shoulder to shoot stupid privates when they try to sneak back into the barracks after curfew, the answer is..." Ray paused, a smile curling at his lips. "I do. A little. Not a whole lot, mind you. Now get to your station, soldier." Bill laughed as he peeled off to relieve the night crew at the reception desk. "Yes, sir." Ray went back to his office and flopped down at his desk. His phone message light blinked at him. The meeting took all of half an hour, and already he had people calling and leaving messages. Christ on a cracker, couldn't he get a cup of coffee first? He decided that yes, he could, and left the messages for when he returned from the coffee cart. Thankfully, there wasn't a line, since the employees were still just coming in to start their day. Soon they, like him, would put off starting their work by taking a trip to the coffee cart. That meant he had a choice of muffins, fresh from the bakery today. He grabbed a bran muffin with raisins and held out his refillable cup for the barista to get him his usual, when a voice spoke just off his shoulder. "You will need to work that off, you know." He turned to see the smiling face of Jack Boynton. He held out his hand. "Got yourself a nice tan there. I assume the Caribbean was good to you." Jack shook his hand with enthusiasm. "Very nice. It's not a bad gig, lover and bodyguard all wrapped in one. Bet the benefits are out of this world." Jack waggled his eyebrows. "Don't you know it? So what brings you down here to the slums?" Ray held out $10 to the cashier and motioned that it would pay for Jack's as well. Jack nodded in thanks and stepped up to place his order. "Coming to turn in my official notice, clean out my locker, say goodbye to people, all that jazz." "I'm touched you'd say goodbye to me." Ray took a bite out of his muffin. It wouldn't take long for the rush of sugar to hit his system. He reveled in every bite. Not bad for a manufactured muffin. Nothing beat homemade, though. "Nah, I just ran into you on accident." Jack was positively beaming with happiness. He looked healthy and relaxed. A small pang of jealousy shot through Ray. Of course, he was thrilled his friend found someone to share his life with. There's no one more deserving than Jack. The jealousy kicked in because it was also something Ray sought. Although he never had the time. Every spare moment available, he put in his work. If he wasn't keeping constant check on Worthington Limited's building security, he was looking up men he served with, trying to find them work, either in the organization or anywhere else in the private sector. Assisting veterans to get work. That was his focus. On the rare night he spent at home, he read. Books were his guilty pleasure. Mainly men's adventure. He didn't feel guilty about indulging in fantasy. His disappointment was that his guilty pleasure genre had so few books with gay male protagonists. Books with the hero having sex with women weren't a chore to read, but it didn't really tickle that final spot inside him. Every so often, though, he'd find a gem or two. In fact, he had picked up the latest by a newer author one of the guys on the night shift recommended. Ray actually looked forward to some alone time with the book in the next week, right after he found someone to replace the 3 men he'd lost. "Ray, are you all right?" Ray jerked and realized he had drifted off in his own thoughts. "Damn sorry, Jack. What were you saying?" "I was saying how stressed you looked. When was the last time you had a vacation?" Seeing that Jack had his coffee, Ray took his change and started walking back to his office. Jack fell into step beside him. "Not since I started working here." "And how long ago was that?" 5 years? Maybe a little longer." "Then you really do need a break." Ray chuckled. He tightened the lid on his travel mug and took a test sip. "Can't afford to now. I've just lost 3 guys." "Does that include me?" "It does," Ray said. "Now we're short, so it looks like I'm pulling doubles until I can get new guys in here and through training." Jack opened Ray's office door since his were full, and they both settled in the chairs on the opposite side of his desk. "I'll put off leaving for a week. I think Marcus would be okay with that." "I want to tell you no, not necessary. I have some guys in the pipeline now. Just waiting on our. But if you can spare a few days until I get them on their training routine, I'd be grateful." "Done. I'll let Marcus know." Jack stared in his coffee for a long moment of silence. "You're a hell of a boss, Ray. If you don't mind my saying, I think your talents are going to waste here." "It's not exactly challenging," Ray conceded. "I find my challenges by making them." "Hell of a way to get through a job." Jack pulled his phone out when it chimed softly in his pocket. He thumbed through it before putting it away. "Look, I got a split, but I want to talk to you about this more." "Not sure what more there is to discuss. I'll tell HR to put you on part-time if your offer was serious." "It was. It's the least I can do for you. Keep me in full-time rotation until you're full up again." Ray stood when Jack did and held his hand out to shake. "You were good. Damn good. I'm going to miss you around here." "You'll still see me around." I will call you later. Let's meet up for dinner or something. After work. Name the time and place. I'll text you. Jack gave Ray a farewell nod and left. Suddenly, the room felt a little emptier with Jack gone. They hadn't worked together long. Maybe 6 months, but Ray knew him from the army and believed Jack to be a good man. All of the guys he saved from spiraling depression and despair were good men. He just regretted he couldn't reach more. He situated himself as a stepping stone for men and women coming fresh out of the service. He wondered if there was something more he could be doing. And if there was more, would he eventually have someone to share the burden at the end of the day? Thoughts best left to reflect on for another time. Today, there was work to do. It was close to shift change when Ray was able to get to his non-critical messages. One of which was from Jack, asking Ray to call him. Dead on his feet from being 3 men short, Ray dropped into his chair and called Jack's number. Jack answered immediately. Must have been a hell of a day. I sent that message right after lunch. Ray glanced at the clock next to his office door. Lost track of time. Sorry about that. What's up? I have been thinking. That's troubling. Ha. Seriously, Ray, I have an idea I want to float by you. Make some time to meet with me this week. Ray leaned back and went through his mental work calendar. I'm really not sure I can break free until Wednesday night. There was muffled talking on Jack's end. Wednesday night it is. Say about 7. Make it 9. This isn't going to cut into Marcus' time? He is making an exception for you. I'll see you then. Right. Text me where to meet. Ray killed the call and stared at the clock. When did this job become so tedious? Chapter 2. Ben. The shop was quiet, something that Ben was quite grateful for. Max, Ben said as he passed through the shop, straightening as he went. Will you be okay up here by yourself for a bit? Sure, Max said. He finished the order for the customer and passed over her change, wishing her a good day as she left. The seating area was blissfully empty, and Ben felt the tension slowly creep out of his shoulders. Of course, Ben appreciated when he had customers. They kept his doors open with their business after all. But after the rushes, it was nice to be able to just take a deep breath and enjoy the quiet before the next rush hit. I'm going to be in the office if you need me. Ben slapped Max on the shoulder on his way by. And try to figure out why my main character's arc isn't coming together like I want it. Stumped or writer's block? Ben exhaled in frustration. I don't know exactly. Both. Either one. He grabbed his mug and filled it with the medium roast. He splashed half and half in and gave it a swirl before he sipped. I may have taken a wrong turn earlier in the book. That's what usually happens. Max wrung out a towel and headed into the restaurant to wipe down some of the tables and straighten the chairs. Oh. Ben paused, watching the young man work. He took that moment to appreciate just how reliable and hardworking Max was. Maybe his detective boyfriend was starting to rub off on him. Or perhaps because he was between semesters at the college and needed the hours. You're a writer now. Max laughed. Hardly. I leave that sort of creativity up to you. No, you said almost the same exact thing with the last book. Oh. And the book before that. And the one before that. All right, I get it, Ben said with a laugh. I'm just saying that's all. Max scooted some chairs around a table. I can handle things up here. Sneak into the back and write on company time. I won't tell the boss. You're a true friend, Max, Ben said in a cooing falsetto. It's my secret calling. Speaking of, can I call Ren to find out what time he and Gail want me and Noah over for dinner? My cell phone took a nosedive into the toilet this morning. I think it's given up on life. Put it in a bag of rice to dry it out before you give up on it completely. It's sitting at home on the counter, up to its call buttons in rice. Good. And sure, give your friend a call. If you get busy, just shout. Max flapped the cloth over his shoulder, and Ben took that as a sign to head to his office. He sat down at his desk and opened his laptop. Normally, he was relaxed with the employees when it came to doing personal things while on the clock. As long as they didn't take advantage of it and let their work slide, he was fine. That was why he didn't feel guilty taking that time to write while he was there at the shop. All his paperwork was caught up until they closed for the night. The past few weeks, Ben had put in extra hours getting the shop in order for a big media blitz he scheduled. It cost a considerable amount of money, and he couldn't afford to waste the opportunity or the investment by screwing around. It was taking its mental toll on his creativity. He hadn't written in weeks, and it was through his book sales that gave him that discretionary cash to put out the newspaper advert for more help at the shop to handle the increased foot traffic the ad would hopefully generate. Now that his shop business was done, Ben faced his pre-order deadline, and his writer's block decided that it was a good time to double down. He stared at the laptop screen, his draft open at where he left off yesterday morning. The cursor blinked accusingly at him, as if to taunt him by saying, "See me taunting you? I'm going to sit right here and not move because I'm being a bastard, and because your pre-order deadline is too close to risk a rewrite now. Asshole." Ben lost track of the time he stared at the blank page, hoping that if he stared at it long enough, the magical words would appear, and he will feel like he had accomplished something. As it was, nothing was happening. He couldn't figure out what was going wrong that caused him to stall him. He didn't feel like it was his outline, because he had worked on it for months. He didn't think it was his plot, it was pretty solid. But the words themselves weren't coming. He wasn't sure if he was uninspired or he was tired, or what it was. Something was happening. Or not happening, actually. "Hey Chief," Della said from the door. "Am I disturbing you?" Ben closed his laptop with a sigh. He turned slowly in his office chair to face his newest employee. "I wish I could say you were," he said. "But you're not. What's up?" Della tilted her head in question. "Is there something I can help you with? Unless you can figure out what is wrong with the story and why it's being so recalcitrant, I'm not real sure there's much anybody can do for me." "Oh," she said. "Writer's block?" "I'm not sure. What you need to do is get in touch with your muse." "My muse?" Ben fought the desire to roll his eyes. He didn't believe in this concept of muses to inspire a writer. He believed all writing came from hard work and not inspiration. But even hard work wasn't working for him at the moment. "I have to confess, I don't have a muse." "Well," she said, leaning against the door jamb, "you could always get laid." Ben didn't bother to stifle his laugh. "Get laid?" Della shrugged. "My roommate is getting her PhD in psychology. When she has to write papers, she says she can't get anything done until she's gotten laid. Something about it freeing up the anxious tension that gathers in her shoulders." Ben self-consciously rolled his head. It was hard to ignore the tightness in his own muscles across the entire upper part of his back. "I never considered that. Not that I have a problem with being inspired about anything," she said, "but my roommate swears by it. According to her, her best papers were written after a lengthy session of sex." He laughed again. "I'm not sure it's such a good idea to take advice of a personal nature from employees, but I'll keep that under advisement." Della held her hands up and backed away. "None of my business, boss, just what's been passed on to me. But let me know how it goes, if you actually try it. It'll be a data point I can pass on to my roommate." That was enough of that. It wasn't that Ben was shy or had anything to hide. He just didn't think it was appropriate to talk about sex with his employees. "What did you need from me?" "We're getting ready for the shift change, and the tape is stuck in the machine again. We need the key to unlock it to straighten it out." Ben pulled a drawer out and fished around for the register keys. He gave them a toss, and Della plucked them out of the air with expert precision. "Don't try to salvage the tape roll. If it's low enough, just ditch it and put in a new roll." "And where do you keep the register tape?" He stood from his chair and pulled a box down from the top of one of his shelves. He flipped open one of the flaps and dug out 2 new tape rolls. He held them up before giving them a toss to her. "It's always on this top shelf. Come in anytime you need it." She held both of them up in thanks and disappeared, leaving Ben to his blank page. He collapsed back down in the chair and scrolled up. Maybe if he reread the last chapter, he would be able to pick up his momentum and keep going. Anything was better than staring at a blinking cursor mocking him. However, a rest break and editing did nothing to shake loose that feeling of being stymied in his creative process. He didn't want to give what Della told him any more consideration, but the reality was that she might actually be on to something. It had been far too long since he had been laid. After Phil broke it off with him, Ben had been reluctant to get involved with anyone. He felt any new partner would distract him from what he wanted to do, and after Phil's hissy fit about being ignored when Ben dealt with his last deadline crunch, he knew that having a relationship and trying to launch his writing career while owning a coffee shop were not compatible. Random hookups were not an option either. Those meant he had to put himself out there, and that involved going out to clubs. Because meeting anyone while working full-time hours at his shop hustling coffee didn't leave a lot of energy or time left over. He knew this was a reality when he first opened his business, but that reality was biting him in the ass at the moment. Ben poured everything into his shop. He knew that businesses were likely to fail in the first 2 years they were open. He was coming up on his 2nd anniversary in a few months. If he could survive until then, continue to turn a profit, no matter how slim the margin, he had confidence he would last into the new year. Or maybe he was just getting old before his time. So Della's advice to get laid while well-meaning wasn't as simple as that. And being on shift until closing tonight certainly wasn't going to help him in that regard. And it still didn't solve his problem. Not only was he still blocked, now he was horny. Great. How was he supposed to write this action scene when all he could think about was sex? Now his concentration was shot. Maybe Della was right. If he could work off some of this excess tension, then he could focus on the task at hand. He could get this scene finished and hopefully move past his block. He sat back in his chair and huffed out a slow breath. So that perhaps was his real problem. It wasn't that he was stuck in the story, it was that he was stuck in his life. Worry about money, paying the bills, surviving until he could make it past that 2-year marker were what was keeping him from the book and the page. Maybe he wasn't the best writer out there, writing men's adventure, but he was prolific. He wasn't doing too shabby in regard to sales. Ever since he got off the query go-round and embraced self-publishing, he had found a degree of success in writing his books. He had fans, a thriving newsletter, and sales that covered his book expenses and kept his apartment bills paid. That allowed him to cut his own salary at the store, so he could channel that extra money into marketing to keep it on its feet. He pulled a piece of paper out of the printer and made a quick list of all the things he was worried about. Anything and everything that was on his mind, that he felt was detracting him from his writing. He had put his worries and concerns down on the page and made a list of action items that he could act on first thing in the morning. Once he filled up the page with a brain dump, he hoped he could move on with his story. He turned back to his story, his fingers poised on the keyboard. He may not be getting laid, and his hero may be in the middle of a shootout, but soon the hero would be with his love interest. Once the hero was out of danger, he could indulge in the kind of sex that Ben himself didn't have the time for. The next time he looked up, an hour had passed. His hero was in a moment of pause, ready to get busy with the love interest, and he decided that was a good time to stop. He wasn't about to push his luck by starting a love scene now. Ben closed his laptop and pushed away from his desk to go out to the front to check on things. He went with the confidence knowing that at least for today, he had pushed back his writer's block a little. "How's it going, boss?" Della asked. She beat him to the coffee carafe and poured him a large cup of his favorite medium brew. She flavored it up like he preferred and handed it to him. He took a sip, closing his eyes for that moment of pure bliss before he opened them again. "Well, I didn't get laid," he said with a friendly bump of his elbow. "But I did think about it, and one thing led to another. In my hero's case, he's at the point where he'll get laid. I suppose that's close enough. You can take that to your roommate." She rolled her eyes and laughed. "I'm not sure it's quite the same thing, but I'll let her know." He sat his coffee to the side and grabbed the straws and coffee stir sticks to refresh the supplies at the coffee station near the door. "You're about due for a break, aren't you? Why don't you go ahead and take it?" Della wasted no time, taking her apron off and setting it to the side. "You're the best," she said as she skipped to the back. They still had a few hours before closing, but business would taper off to almost nothing right before he locked up. He gathered up the cleaning supplies and started to spray down the empty tables and chairs. Once Della returned from her break, they would get everything ready to close and be out of here in record time. That would give Ben another hour of writing before he had to go to bed, to start the day all over again. He still wouldn't be getting laid, but his hero definitely would. Chapter 3. Ray. Ray glanced at his phone and back up at the name of the coffee shop. Hot Sips. It matched the name and address Jack sent him. Since he was early, he'd grab a coffee and a table. He pushed into the shop, and immediately the aroma of coffee and bagels greeted him. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since lunch. Since Jack wasn't here yet, Ray picked one of the empty tables with a clear sightline to the front door. Hazard of military training. The cafe looked like it was past what would normally be a dinner crowd, so the noise level was pleasant with light pop music at just the right volume. He took off his suit jacket and draped it over a chair to claim the table. Then he moved to stand in line to get a coffee and a bagel with the spring vegetable cream cheese. That would stave off hunger until he could get home and throw a frozen pizza in the oven. 2 people were behind the counter. An attractive young woman worked the register and pulled the coffee, and another man worked the food prep. The young woman smiling brilliantly at him as he stepped up to the counter to place his order. What drew his attention, though, was the other man in the back slicing his bagel and popping it into the toaster. From the back, Ray certainly appreciated the view. He had athletic shoulders which tapered to a trim waist. His work slacks hugged his ass nicely. He bet there was just as much eye candy in a front view too. Ben moved to the side to wait at the area to pick up his order. He checked his phone. No messages. He pulled out his e-reader and opened the book he was currently reading to pass the time. Ray. Ray held up his hand with his ticket. "That's me." Now the man was turned to face Ray, and he was not disappointing in the least. Sandy brown hair with piercing brown eyes and a dimpled smile. A quick glance down verified that there was no ring on the man's left hand. Not that it ruled out girlfriends or boyfriends, but only that he wasn't married. The man slid the bag and the cup of coffee over to Ray. "We just put out fresh half and half at the station if you want to dress it up." His dimples went deep with his smile. The moment their fingers touched, Ray was struck by how warm it felt. He fought the temptation to grab the man's hand to hold it. He mumbled his thanks and picked up his bag and his coffee. When he looked up, the other man was still staring at him. Those were some incredible bedroom eyes with the thickest eyelashes he'd ever seen on a man. "Thank you. And yes, they're natural." Ray started. "Oh, did I say that out loud?" The other man laughed. "It's really okay. I get the question all the time if they are real." "They're real." "Well, they are a good-looking set of eyes." Good God, he sounded like he was in high school. The other man laughed again. "Thank you. If you need anything else, let us know. We don't close for another hour." "Good to know." He held up the bag and the coffee. "Thanks again." Ray managed to get back to the table before he spontaneously combusted from how ridiculous he sounded. And now he got to sit here in his embarrassment and wait for Jack to show up. He fixed up his bagel and took the lid off his coffee, blew across the surface before taking a sip. After that first drink, Ray pulled his phone and checked the time. Jack was late. Not by a lot, but the man was usually prompt. There were no messages or texts to give Ray an ETA. He would wait a little bit to see if Jack showed up. Being the personal security to a high-level executive, regardless of also being the man's lover, came with working long hours. While he waited, he opened his e-reader again. The story was really good. It was an adventure series that felt like it was a little closer to home. The protagonist of the stories was gay. Ray was so tired of reading men's adventure series with a straight protagonist traveling the world and betting all the women that fell across his path. There was still sex, no doubt. Hot sex with another man. True to the genre, the current love interest of the book also just fell across his path. But it was a comfort to finally read books more like him and what he liked. He'd gotten as far as the 3rd chapter before the message chime alerted him. He picked up his phone and saw the message from Jack. "Sorry, dude, caught late at work. Can we reschedule?" Ray replied, "Sure, give me call when you can." There went his night. Ray checked the time and then sighed deeply. Too late for a pizza. He supposed that he could stop by a restaurant and get something to eat on his way home. But going home to an empty apartment was an unappealing thought. The guy had said they would be open another hour. He might as well get something to eat here before he headed home. He went up to the counter and examined the menu. The young woman was gone, and the man with the deep brown eyes met him. "Can I get you something?" "Yeah, my meeting was canceled and I need to get something to eat." "What's good?" The man smiled, the corner of his eyes crinkling. Ray's eyes flicked to his name tag. "Ben." "Well, perhaps I'm biased since I own the place, so I'd say everything is good. What do you have as a preference? Maybe we can narrow it down from there." "Nothing vegetarian." "Do you have anything with roast beef?" "I have a roast beef hoagie that will knock your socks off." Ray laughed. "That's a tall order, especially since I wear boots." "I don't make promises that I can't keep." Ben said that with a wink. "Can I get you a refill on your coffee?" "Sure." "Okay, grab the chips you want," Ben said as he rang up the order. Ray handed over the cash, and their fingers touched again. That same electric feeling jolted up his arm, and it caused him to exhale sharply. Ben's eyes grew wide when their fingers slid apart. "So, just have a seat and I'll bring your order out to you when it's done." Ray nodded. "Sure. I'll just be, over there." He backed up several steps before turning to head to his table. It was hard to get back into reading his book. He would much rather watch Ben work. The man appeared at ease behind the counter. He supposed that meant that Ben had been doing it a while. Just as he got back into the story, Ben appeared at his table bearing a tray. "Order up," he said with a grin. Ray slid the e-reader to the side. "It looks good. Fresh ingredients?" "I'm impressed. I'm not fond of prepackaged foods. We even make up our own spreads for our bagels." Ray motioned for Ben to take a seat if he wanted. "I pass by this place every day on my way to work. I kept meaning to come in, but usually I'm jammed for time." Ben laughed as he took the seat across from Ray. "I wish I had the luxury of going in late to work. But I'm the boss. If I don't show up, nothing gets ready." "How long have you been open?" "Coming up on 2 years." "So is it true what they say about not turning a profit in those first 2 years?" Ben shrugged, leaning back in the chair with ease. "I'll let you know when the anniversary passes. I don't spend the money on fast cars, nice clothes, and things that don't benefit the business itself, so I think I'm doing all right." Ray took a bite of the sandwich. Whatever sauce Ben put on it, it leaked out the side, and he rushed for a paper towel to keep it from dripping on his shirt. It was delicious. And he made a soft moan of appreciation. Ben chuckled softly. "I'll take that as a compliment." Ray finished chewing and swallowed, wiping at his mouth again. "You should. I take it this sauce is also made fresh in the store." Ben nodded his head. "Like I said, only fresh." He glanced at the door and then at the time. "So, you've been here for an hour. Your date didn't show." A sudden rush of panic flooded Ray. Not a date, he said, probably a little too quickly. An old army buddy of mine needed to talk about something. But yeah, he's a no-show. I'm sorry to hear that. Ben picked up the e-reader. An avid reader? Yeah. My mother was an English teacher. She's where I got my love for reading. What do you like to read? Ray took another bite of a sandwich and gathered his thoughts. It was hard to gauge what to tell people. Some people could be real literary snobs. He was not one of them. He enjoyed reading genre fiction. The more outlandish and outrageous, the better. In fact, he never got into what all the book clubs and reader lists suggested. He found them abysmally boring. But what kind of reader was Ben? They were just talking, nothing more, but it seemed a shame to alienate the man before they got to know each other. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Mostly genre fiction. He took a breath and decided to dive right in. I'm currently reading a men's adventure series published by a new author I discovered. Ben's eyebrow rose. Men's fiction? An interesting choice. What drew you to this author? And who was it? I'm always looking for new men's adventure to read. Ray sat back. He was surprised at that. Ben didn't look like someone who read that sort of genre. He looked like a science fiction reader or something. Just went to show you could never judge a book by its cover. He wiped his hands off and picked up his e-reader. After a few swipes, he opened the book he was reading and went to the cover page before he handed over to Ben. Ben took it, glanced at it, then started laughing. It was hard not to take offense at that, because Ray did just hear Ben say that he read men's fiction too. He half smiled and asked, "What's so funny?" "So, you said you enjoy this author?" Ray nodded. "I do. I've ordered his next 2 pre-orders. He has a compelling way of writing, and he tells a really good yarn. Plus, he writes protagonists that I can identify with." And that was as close as he was to admitting he was gay to a stranger as he was going to get. Ben smiled brightly. "You like Benjamin Scott?" "Yeah." Ben leaned to the side and pulled out his wallet. Teasing out his driver's license, he slid it across the table to Ray. Ray picked it up and glanced at it. "Get out," once he registered the name on the license. It was like he had just stepped into some surreal situation. "I can't believe it's you." Ben took his driver's license back and put his wallet away again. "You know, you're the first fan I've met. It's not like I keep it a secret, neither do I advertise it to people around me. No one here reads what I write. Some don't seem to enjoy reading at all. See, that's something I don't get. Reading expands so many horizons. People who don't read don't know what they're missing." Ben held his hands up. "Preaching to the choir, brother," he said. Ray chuckled softly. "If I had known I was going to meet my favorite author, I would have brought a paperback for him to sign." He reached across the table and held his hand out. "I'm Ray, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Ben." Chapter 4. Ben. Ben talked for he didn't know how long. It had been far too long since he had the opportunity to simply relax and talk to an attractive man. He felt a deep tug of attraction to Ray. It was electric every time they touched, or when Ray grinned at him. Every time he met Ray's gaze, threads tugged between them, wrapped around them, connecting them on a deeper level. Although, that was getting into some heavy, metaphorical shit. To be honest, Ben was extremely horny. Due to that, he couldn't be sure if that's what the connection was all about. Did it really matter? It was hard to say. Ray was an attractive man with a military bearing about him. He looked good in his suit and had a broad chest. He was probably solid rock. Every time Ray's arms bent, the muscle threatened to rip through the fabric of his shirt. He bet they could hold Ben all night as they fucked across every surface in the place. Ben finally glanced at the time. "I really hate to break our conversation, but I need to start closing down. I really hope you drop by the shop again soon." He extended his hand across the table to shake with Ray. "I love talking to you." And he hoped to do more again soon. Ray shook his hand and stood. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to keep you from working. I'll just head on out. It was a pleasure talking to you too, Ben. I'm kind of glad my buddy didn't show tonight. Ben laughed. Me too. As Ray gathered his stuff, a mournful feeling washed over him. He didn't want Ray to go. There's no rush to leave, by the way. We still have 15 minutes. Everything is done. All we have left is wiping down this one table and mopping the floor. With a grateful nod, Ray sat back down to finish his coffee, while Ben joined Della for the closeout procedure. Right before it was time to lock the doors, Ray stood and took his empty cup to the front counter. Can I leave my jacket and e-reader here while I hit the men's room? He handed the empty cup to Ben. Ben took the cup and added it to his garbage bag. Sure, it's just down that hall, and he gestured with his head. Won't be a moment, and then I'll be out of your hair. And Ray disappeared. So who's tall, beefy, and handsome? Della asked when Ray was out of earshot. His face reddened when he thought about how big Ray's hands were when they wrapped around the coffee mug. He cleared his throat. A fan. That's all. Aha, was all Della said as she gathered up the paperwork. Ben studiously ignored that and tied the garbage bag closed, then set it by the back door. Della, why don't you go ahead and head out? I can handle things from here. With a delighted clap, Della kissed his cheek. You're the best, Ben. She ducked into his office to grab her purse and coat and clock out. Unlocking the back door, Ben lugged the garbage bag out to the dumpster. As he headed back toward the building, a man came out of nowhere, stepping directly in his path. Don't say nothing, just get back inside, the man said gruffly. Ben froze in place. He slowly lifted his hands when he saw the wickedly sharp knife. The man circled and forced Ben's back to the building. I don't want any trouble, he said. And I don't want to give you no trouble. Get back in the store, nice and slow, and you won't get hurt. The thief waved the knife menacingly, following Ben, as he backed all the way to the front counter. Nice and easy, empty the contents of the drawer in this bag. The man threw a balled-up plastic bag at Ben. It bounced off his chest and landed on the floor in front of them. Slowly, Ben bent down and picked it up, his eyes never leaving the shining knife. It was then when he noticed Ray's jacket and e-reader still laying there. Ray was still in the building. Panic lanced through him like a hot rod, making his stomach twist. The guy was only carrying a knife, but a knife could do just as much damage to a body as a gun. He didn't want Ray to catch the guy by surprise and get injured. It was his fervent hope that Della had already left, because he sure didn't want her getting caught in this either. He tried to keep his body angled between the thief and Ray's jacket on the counter, hoping to hide it from view. If the man thought they were alone, then maybe he wouldn't get nervous and do something rash, then take the money and leave. He hit the key combination on the keypad for the drawer to pop open. Slowly, he started pulling the bills out and stacking them neatly in the bag. A hysterical part of his mind marveled at how calm he felt faced with this dangerous situation. His biggest concern was to keep the guy calm, and no one was hurt. The guy pushed Ben roughly out of the way, and he collided with the counter, catching himself on Ray's coat. The jostled movement allowed Ben to catch a whiff of Ray's cologne. The man smelled nice. What a weird thing to think while somebody was threatening him with a knife. The robber jerked all the money out of the register drawer and stuffed in the bag. Slowly he backed away, holding the knife out in front of him. From over the robber's shoulder, Ben spotted Della coming out of the office. It sent him into panic overload. She almost spoke out, then paused when their eyes met. Immediately, she knew something was wrong. She froze right in her steps. Now we can go to the office, and you're going to open the safe. Ben shook his head. The safe is on an hour lock. Even if I put the combination in, it takes an hour before it will unlock. What kind of safe does that? The kind that was built for situations just like this, Ben said, trying to keep the sarcasm out of his voice. That's a load of bullshit. In the office now and open the safe. Della's eyes grew wide and she backed into the storeroom. Ben hoped it was enough that she would be out of sight when they passed. Ben took a deep breath and dropped his arms slowly. Showing the robber he was no threat, he slowly walked around him, staying out of range of the knife and hoping that his deliberately slow motions would give Della time to hide. He glanced at the hallway that led to the bathrooms, thankful that Ray hadn't come out yet. At least he would stay safe. "Hurry up. I ain't got all day," the robber said. He waved the knife menacingly. Ben jumped back in defense. He collided with the back counter, and several of the kitchen utensils fell clattering to the counter. "Easy, I'm going. Give me a break, I'm a little nervous. I've never been held up at knife point before." "Shut up and just get to the office." He finally got around the robber and started down the hall to the office. With his back to the man, he hoped and prayed that the man didn't stab him in the back. By the time he got to the office, the sounds of a scuffle drew his attention. He turned around in time to see Ray holding the robber's knife hand in a joint lock, forcing the man to his knees. "Call the police," Ray said in a deadly calm voice. If the situation weren't so frightening, Ben would be turned on by the low, rumbling confidence that laced Ray's words. In fact, it imbued Ray's entire being with a dark confidence that had Ben's cock twitching in anticipation. Wow, talk about awkward reaction. His life was threatened, he was in danger of being robbed of the day's receipts, and yet here he was turned on by a handsome stranger's intervention, like in a scene from one of his books. Della popped out of the storeroom and collided with Ben. "Oh my God," she said breathlessly. "Are you okay?" Ben hooked her arm and dragged her into the office to place the call to the authorities. "Other than being scared shirtless, I'm fine. Call the police." She waved her cell phone. "I've already called," she said. Ben paused. "You did?" In response to his question, he heard the blare of sirens as they approached. He smiled at her. "I hate that I'm going to have to ask you to stay and talk to the authorities." "Don't be sorry," she said. "I wasn't going to do anything other than go home and feed my cat. Your fan seems like a regular action, Joe. This is much more exciting." Ben shook his head, giving a strained laugh. "It certainly was." He squeezed her arm and gestured for her to have a seat in his office while he went out and talked with Ray, while they waited for the police. Ray had the man's hands zip-tied behind his back. The robber was face down in the dining area. He positioned a chair over the man's body while he lay prone on the floor. Ray sat casually while he read on his e-reader like it was nothing. When he saw Ben, he closed the reader down and looked up at him. "Are you okay? He didn't hurt you, did he?" "I didn't see any blood." Ben drew a shaking hand through his hair. "Other than bruising my ego?" "No, I'm fine. Just a little shaken." "It's understandable. How did he get in?" Ben gestured to the back door. "He was waiting for me when I went to take out the trash." "Is that right?" Ray peered over the back of the chair to look at the man pinned beneath him. The man struggled and cursed a blue streak. That just made Ray laugh. It wasn't long after that 3 squad cars pulled up in front of his shop, blue and white lights rotating and bouncing off the walls and surrounding buildings. When the authority pushed through the front door, Ray got off his chair, held up his hands and backed away, allowing the police room to arrest the suspect and take their statements. Chapter 5. Ben. It was almost midnight when Ben finally shooed Della home. In fact, he couldn't stop the cracking of his own jaws in wide yawns. Adrenaline left his body, leaving exhaustion in its place. What impressed him most was Ray's willingness to stick around, even after the police had left. "Is there anything I can do to help?" For goodness sakes, the man was just involved with apprehending a thief, and he was asking how Ben was doing? Ben let out a shaky breath, then shook his head. "A little off. Not sure I want to walk home now, but I'll live." "Walk? So you live close by?" Ray asked. "About 3 or so blocks away. Normally, I don't have a problem walking home at night. This neighborhood was usually very safe. But..." Ben waved his hand around them. "Was it safe? I'll get the place squared away and then figure out how to get home. I could call a taxi." Ray loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves. Giving Ben a wide smile, he simply said, "Let's get to work." Ben stood there gobsmacked. He shook himself to finally respond. Oh, Ray, I couldn't possibly, there's no need." He waved Ben off. "You were in the process of shutting down for the night anyway, and I can mop. Put me to work and then I'll drive you home." Ben wanted to argue. It was ludicrous that the customer and a man he just met wanted to help. But the help was very welcome. "Okay, thank you for the offer. I'll put you to work." Ben showed Ray where the mop and the cleaner was and put him to work to getting the floors done, while Ben finished up the paperwork and opened the safe. He was very glad that the thief was caught before he had to prove that he had just lied about the safe not being opened in any time. It was the only way he knew to hopefully discourage the thief. What would have happened if Ray hadn't stopped the thief before they got to the office? He had thousands of dollars in safe. It made his knees weak to even think about it. Once he heard Ray at the industrial sink in the back, Ben finished up what he needed to do, locked the safe and started turning down the lights. "You don't know how much I appreciate your help, Ray," he said. Ray flashed him a brilliant smile, and it liquefied his knees. He regretted that he couldn't drop to his knees right there and blow the man in gratitude. "I can take a rain check on that," Ray said. Ben's eyes widened and his face flushed a deep heat. "Oh my God, did I just say that out loud?" Ray grinned and shrugged. "It's the exhaustion talking, I know." Ben grabbed his jacket, and they swung through the front of the store for Ray to get his. He set the alarm and locked the front door for the night. It was the exhaustion talking, he finally said. Because he obviously couldn't deny that he said it. Suddenly, shyness seized him and he bit on his bottom lip. "But I do mean it," he admitted. Ray gave Ben a smile, one that said he didn't believe what Ben said. He motioned in the direction of where he had parked his truck. It was too bad that Ben really was too exhausted to make good on it, otherwise he would prove it to Ray right then and there. But the stresses of the evening really were catching up with him. So he would take the offered ride to get home and just hope that he would find Ray another day and make it up to him. The whole thought train was ridiculous, and he started laughing in that bone-tired way. He was tired, he was shaken, and he was really attracted to the man who had just apprehended a thief and was now helping him in the truck. Ray laughed with him, but probably not for the same reasons before shutting the door. When he crawled in behind the wheel of the truck and started it up, he rested his arm along the back of Ben's seat. His thumb ruffled through Ben's hair to get his attention. It was a simple gesture, and yet filled Ben with such longing to have someone he could be that comfortable with all the time. "Hey," Ray said. Ben stifled a yawn before rocking his head to look over at Ray. "I'm sorry, yes?" Ray's hand turned to cup the back of his head. "I need to know where you live. Don't go to sleep on me." "Right. I'm awake." Ben straightened in the seat and blinked hard. "I really am literally right down the street." He gestured right in front of them in the direction that the truck was parked. "It's the group of brownstones just up ahead about 3 blocks. It was odd how the affectionate touch to his hair warmed him. Well, maybe it wasn't so odd. Ben was starved for physical contact. Phil was so long ago now. Being in the front seat of Ray's truck, knowing that Ray had not only come to his defense, protected him, prevented a robbery that Ben could ill afford, he was now being tender, affectionate, and attentive. Ray's touch was electric, and Ben desperately wanted to lean into him and fall asleep in that strong embrace. The jolt of movement as Ray eased into the light traffic and drove slowly down the street brought Ben back to alertness. The silence was comforting. Ben chewed on the bottom lip in indecision. He wanted to invite Ray up. Innocently, for a cup of coffee. Maybe not so innocently, to have a roll in the sheets. The problem? Ben simply did not have the energy to do either. Within a handful of minutes, Ben pointed at the empty spot in front of his stoop. "This is it." Ray expertly parallel parked between the 2 vehicles belonging to his neighbors. He put the truck into park but left it idling. "This is a nice neighborhood. Quiet." Ben chuckled. Well, it used to be quiet. Until some asshole with a knife decided he wanted to rob me. Tried to rob you. Tried being the operative word here. And I have no way to tell you how much I appreciate it. You should not have put yourself in danger like that. I'm grateful all the same. Ben looked over at Ray to see him staring. Was it something he said? Whatever it was, the moment passed and Ray shrugged a shoulder. It really wasn't an issue. I realize it was dangerous. He had a knife. And he could have done some serious harm to you and your employee. But it's what I do. Ben's mouth dropped open. That's some dangerous work you're in. It pays the bills. Ben climbed out of the truck and stood there in the door as he fished for his keys. Look, I'd love to invite you up for a cup of coffee, but I'm wiped out. Can I thank you properly by fixing dinner for you one night? He blinked, astounded the moment the invitation came out of his mouth. If he had been thinking clearly, Ben may not have been so forward with the dinner invitation. He probably would have played it a little more coyly, to suss out whether Ray would even be interested. But that gentle touch at the back of his head seemed to unlock something between them. He knew there was attraction. He could tell by the gazes Ray had been giving him all night. Ray drummed his fingers on the dashboard before he nodded. I'd like that. He held out his hand for Ben's phone and input his number. The moment Ray's rang, he hung up. Now you have my number and I have yours. Let me know when and I'll be here. Ben took his phone from him with a tired smile. The moment their fingers touched, every nerve in his body came alive, just like had been happening at the shop all night. It was better than a shot of espresso. Reluctantly, he stepped back and closed the door. Ray didn't pull away until Ben was in his brownstone and closing the door. He watched from his living room window until the truck's taillights disappeared from view. He regretted not inviting Ray up. Chapter 6. Ray. When Ray got back to his apartment, pulling into the parking place in front of his building, he was surprised to realize he made it home. He didn't remember the trip. Probably because the entire drive back had been filled with thoughts of Ben. The attempted robbery had really put a damper on things. Which was probably a selfish way of looking at it. It was a dangerous situation, and it would have impacted Ben negatively if Ray had not been there to stop it. But he was selfish in this regard. Let's face it, an attempted robbery cockblocked him. And that sucked. Maybe it was for the best. Ray was still starry-eyed over the fact that his favorite writer owned a coffee shop near where he worked. He would fanboy hard if he wasn't paying attention. That excitement of meeting someone he felt like he only knew through their words was exciting. Ray would have liked very much to get to know the man behind the words much better. Sadly, connecting deeper that night wasn't meant to be. It was fine. Ben looked like he was dead on his feet. Adrenaline did that to a body. Ray had seen enough action overseas that he was able to handle that infusion of adrenaline and then the subsequent crash. The upside was he got an invitation out of it. That was nothing to sneeze at. The next day at work, Ray entered his office and started his day by listening to his messages. Mostly business, but one from Jack, who again apologized profusely for missing last night. Ray gathered up his reports for the shift meeting and called Jack on his way down the hall. Hey man, Jack said. The background noise was fairly loud, meaning that he was on the road. I won't keep you long, I just wanted to let you know that it all turned out in the end. And we can definitely reschedule. Also, you're on the work rotation for the week. Only until my newbies get out of corporate training and can start. Cool. I'll let Marcus know. It sounds like you had a good night. Did you manage to make up for my no-show? Ray chuckled. If you're talking about getting laid, no. But I had the chance to talk with the coffee shop owner. He's a decent guy. And there was a little bit of excitement that I'm not going to go into right now. Aw dude, don't leave a guy hanging. Not with my boss sitting right next to you. Drop by my office when you have a few minutes. I have the morning shift change meeting. Will do. Jack killed the call and Ray went into his meeting. When he got out of the briefing, Jack sat in his office with his feet propped up on Ray's desk. Ray closed the office door and swatted at his feet to move. "Good morning," he said. With a dramatic put-upon groan, Jack shifted his feet off the desk and moved to the chair across from Ray's desk. "How's it hanging?" Ray shook his head and laughed. He was not getting into that. "So, are you here for your shift or are you where you can reschedule?" Jack pulled out his cell phone and thumbed through his calendar. "Both. But you didn't sound all that excited to reschedule." Ray flopped into his chair and gave his folder a flip to land on his desk. "I am if it's gonna be at that coffee shop." Jack's head fell back and he laughed. "So you're sniffing around some hottie's back door, are you?" "Your phrasing sucks, but maybe. We'll have to see. So tell me what happened. You really do have my curiosity up." Ray groaned. "Some dumb ass decided to rob the place. At knife point. Get out. Who does something stupid like that these days? Desperate people, I guess. Anyway, apparently the robber didn't see me when I went to the men's room. I got the drop on him and was able to keep him subdued until the police arrived." Ray leaned back in his chair. "It could have gone ugly, if I'm honest. The owner and one of his employees were the only ones there. You know how stuff like that can go pear-shaped fast." Jack grunted. "All too well, dude, all too well. So how about we plan it for next Wednesday night?" Ray pulled his phone and made a note in his calendar app. "Don't stand me up this time. You have my curiosity about what you want to talk about. I wish you could say it was all my idea, but Marcus was the one who actually suggested it." Jack rose to his feet and headed for the door. Ray followed and they shook hands at the door. "Now you have my attention. At least one of you is known for forward, critical thinking." "Hey, that hurts my feelings." Ray chuckled. "Put a gun in your hand and you're a deadly son of a bitch. Your man is the boss of a Fortune 500 business. His gun is his ability to herd a bunch of cats into a multi-billion-dollar company. I won't comment on what else he's good at," Jack said with a cheeky grin. "Get out of here before I get jealous. Check in with Tompkins for your duty rotation and see you Wednesday." Jack gave Ray a jaunty salute and disappeared around the corner. He was curious about what genius idea Marcus came up with. He didn't have time for it occupy his brain space. Right now, he had a notion to run down to Hot Sips to see Ben again. This time with no side distractions. Getting to Hot Sips wasn't meant to be in Ray's day. He had training of the 3 new guys, paperwork out the ass and monthly meetings with department heads and upper management. Jack was there, standing against the far wall behind Marcus, his 1,000-yard stare still perfected even after years of being a civilian. Even though the CEO was adamantly against useless meetings, this one was unfortunately necessary for everyone to stay up to date on company operations. It also meant sitting through endless updates that really didn't impact Ray's department. Projections and numbers were for the bean counters. Anything that would directly impact security issues, he was already in touch with those who he needed the FaceTime with. His phone buzzed from a text notification. He pulled it out and checked it. It was from an unknown number. "How is tomorrow night for dinner?" Ben. While Ray had been hoping to hear from him, he wasn't expecting it so soon after seeing him. It was a very welcome surprise. His body warmed at the thought that Ben was actually serious about it. There was a part of him that didn't think Ben's offer had actually been genuine, but only said, as one of those social niceties said in awkward situations, "It's good. I don't anticipate a schedule conflict." Good. Food allergies, preferences? Ray was a little rusty at this social thing. He worked security details. Being nice was never part of the job description. It was only when he, because of a department head, that he had to start exercising his respectful but firm muscle, which he had honed from years of being an NCO in the Army. Being nice with Ben was going to be easy, though. He deeply desired that. None. Am weak for Italian, though. Noted. 7 p.m. Friday. Well, it was official. Ray had a date. Chapter 7. Ben. Ben set aside his phone and stared off in the distance. That had been simultaneously one of the easiest and the hardest things he'd ever done. The past several years he'd been so busy trying to get the shop on its feet, he had no time to date. The only relief he got was in the shower or before bed. Just him and his hand. That was all the socializing he was able to fit in. The rest was in dealing pleasantly with customers. The thought of having a quiet dinner with no business catastrophe waiting to take his attention was quite pleasant. And to have that dinner with Ray, his savior and apparent fanboy, was the cherry on top. Ray was like the heroes in his book. Steel jaw, lightning eyes, a man of few words and more action. He wondered just how firm he was beneath his suit. Ben. Max's voice broke through his thoughts, and he jerked, realizing he was wool-gathering and heading for potentially embarrassing fields. With a sigh to repress the irritation at not being able to undress Ray in his mind, he forced a smile at Max. "What's up?" Max handed him a 20. "Need ones. Is everything okay? Della called me this morning, telling me what happened at closing. Are you sure you should be here?" "Why shouldn't I be here? We weren't injured. It was just a little excitement, that's all. The robber was caught, so there's no chance of a repeat of last night. I hope." Ben went to the office to get the change. He input the code and sat in his chair to wait the 15 minutes for it to cycle through and open. "But I'll call Della and tell her to take the night off. I can cover her shift." "You're a machine man," Max said, leaning in the doorway to the office. "Have you thought about hiring someone part-time so you can, actually take time off to write? I mean, you're the boss, you're allowed to do stuff like that." Truthfully, Ben had considered it. Still on the fence. It would give me time to write. But would I actually take advantage of that? Hard to say. "If you want something done, give it to a busy man?" Max said. "Pretty much. I do my best writing in the afternoon and evenings, but if I have more time to write, I'm not convinced I will actually take the time to write. Instead, I'd fill the time with stuff that isn't necessary. How about just taking time off for you? I don't remember the last time you took a day off and went skiing or hiking or just strolling through the zoo. You never talk about it. All work and no play, dude." "That still applies." The safe beeped and Ben opened it to make the change Max needed. "I guess. It would help to refill the well when I get dry. I've just been relying on streaming to get me through." Max took the handful of bills and verified the count. "I'm just saying, sometimes it's nice to leave work behind and just fill your head with something that doesn't demand processing power." The man did have a point. "I'll take it under advisement." With a flap of the bills, Max disappeared to the front of the shop. Since he was already in the safe, Ben started the deposit. In the back of his mind, Max's words tickled at his brain. To be honest, he didn't feel comfortable taking time off. Not even on the scheduled day, the shop was closed. It wasn't that he didn't trust his employees to keep things running smoothly. He felt confident he could leave the shop in their hands for a day. He'd been working practically every day since he opened the shop. What did a day off actually feel like? Tomorrow night would be a mini-test. He planned on leaving early, so he could get the fresh ingredients to make his mother's lasagna for his dinner with Ray. Every time he thought about it, excitement and panic warred with each other. He flip-flopped between backing out and holding firm. The thought, the anticipation made Ben's body tingle from head to toe. Technically, he couldn't afford the night off from writing. His pre-order deadline was looming. While he could put it off, he didn't want to disappoint his readers. Readers like Ray. That was a whole new level of awkward right there. Ben had been writing for a couple of years, and he'd gotten his share of fan mail, which always pleased him. Even the ones that crossed a line into just a little creepy. Those were easy to dodge. Ray had read his words. Ray had read his sex scenes. Ben's face flushed with embarrassment at the thought. And now, he was going to sit across the table from him. On Friday, Ben rushed up the stairs to his brownstone after the lift dropped him off, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Juggling the bags, he fumbled with his keys and they dropped on the stoop between his feet. He tried to grab them, but his bags-laden hands made it hard to get a hold on them. He straightened, blew out a slow breath and closed his eyes. He needed to slow down. Yes, he was late getting home. Luckily, Ray wasn't there yet. There was plenty of time to get the lasagna started and in the oven before the other man showed up. Just play it cool, stay focused on task. After a moment, he set the bags on the stoop and took his time getting the door open. Pocketing his keys, he picked up his bags again, kicked his door shut and headed straight for the kitchen to start dinner. Moving with focus and determination, and a whole lot of multitasking experience from his shop, he was able to get the lasagna in the oven in quick order. He set the timer and glanced at the time. Ray was due there soon, and he still needed to shower so he didn't smell like coffee and tuna melts. Plus, the salad still wasn't made, but that was a worry for later. Shower first. He managed it in record time. There was still plenty to do, and he gauged by the clock that he could swing it if he didn't get precious about the salad and the perfect thickness of the slices of the French bread. Which all turned on its head when the doorbell rang. Ben turned an alarmed gaze at the clock. Ray was early? Of course he was early. Guys like Ray were always early. He carried the hand towel with him when he went to answer the door. Turned out he'd need it to wipe up his drool when he saw Ray's form filling the doorway. Was Ray always that big, or was it an optical illusion? Sorry, I know I'm a little early, Ray said with a grin that made Ben's insides liquefy. Ben blinked quickly. Ray was talking to him in that deep bass voice he could only fantasize about. He shook it off and waved Ray in. No, it's fine. In fact, I need to apologize. I got home a little late, so the lasagna isn't going to be on time. You mentioned lasagna in your invitation, so I took the liberty of bringing wine. Ray held up the bottle as he brushed by Ben. Ray's warmth seeped through all the layers. His cologne floated on the air like a butterfly, not too overpowering and deadly sexy. Ben closed his eyes so he could remember the scent. That was going to fuel a lot of long nights with only his hand as company. It's perfect, Ben managed to say as he took the wine. I am finishing up the salad while we wait for the lasagna. It smells divine, Ray said. He followed Ben into the kitchen. If you have a corkscrew and 2 glasses, I'll get us started. Perfect. Ben dug out his corkscrew, handing it off to Ray as he pulled the core from the lettuce and rinsed the leaves. With all the vegetable fixings for the salad, Ben was suddenly seized with a question. Did I ask if you had any food allergies? You did and I don't. It's nice of you to ask though. Not many people think of that these days. Ray pulled the cork from the bottle and set it aside to rest. As long as it's not poisonous, I'll be fine. Ben chuckled softly and started chopping the cucumbers. I hope I don't poison my guest for dinner. I'm a fairly decent cook. Otherwise, I'd put on weight from all the food at the shop. It's as tasty as I can make it, but it can put the pounds on. Probably not a problem for you. I'm sure you work out regularly. Okay, now he was babbling. Ray was standing there, dressed casually in jeans and a button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled up his forearms, showing off the tattoos which peeked from beneath the shirt. All Ben wanted to do was just skip everything and drag the man back to the bedroom. While the fit of Ray's jeans was something to behold, that ass was a work of art. To see the tattoos down along his forearms, well, Ben had a definite weakness for tattoos. All his alpha male characters sported tattoos. I do all right. There's a gym at work that we're allowed to use. Where is that? Where you work? Get me a knife, I'll help. Ray poured up the wine and handed 1 glass to Ben. Ben retrieved another knife and the onion, setting it in front of him. Taking the knife and onion, Ray expertly chopped it up. Worthington, Limited. I'm their head of security. Right. I vaguely remembered we talked about that, before the guy so rudely tried to rob me. I haven't heard from the police on that. I assumed there weren't any snaffus to prevent from charging the guy. The aroma of raw onion filled the air, and Ben was struck with the sudden idea that it was the absolute worst thing for a date. Onion breath. And with all the minced garlic in the lasagna, and the garlic bread. He sighed heavily. "What's up?" Ray asked, pushing the pile of chopped onion to the side. He grabbed the avocado next. That sounded defeatist. "Is everything okay?" "No," Ben said with a self-deprecating chuckle. "I just thought about all the onion and garlic. We'll have to sit 6 feet away from each other after dinner to avoid garlic breath." Ray laughed out loud. "We're both eating it. I'm pretty sure we'll be nose blind to it by that time. Besides, get enough wine in us. I'm sure one of us can be seduced to the point it won't matter." A shiver ran down Ben's spine at the thought of any seduction. Was he that transparent? He cut his gaze to Ray's to see how serious he was about that. "I didn't invite you here to bed you, Ray." Ray's attention didn't deviate from the task at hand. His lips pursed for a moment before he spoke. "That's a disappointment. Not that I came to get laid, but—" He lifted a shoulder casually. "But you're a good-looking guy, and I won't deny that I was disappointed that I didn't get to kiss you when I dropped you off." Chapter 8. Ray. Ben stood there, mouth hanging open. Had Ray gone too far? There were times when the truth wasn't ready to be received. Or maybe he'd read the signs wrong. He scrubbed his thumb across his forehead. "Sorry, Ben. That sounded weird. I don't want you to think that I'm pressuring you. The invitation was appreciated, and I'm content to." Before Ray could finish, Ben was in his personal space, tipping onto his toes and mashing their mouths together in a fierce and sloppily passionate kiss. He lost his sense of spatial awareness, trying to figure out where to set his wine glass, but failing miserably. One arm wrapped around Ben's body to hold him close as they explored each other's mouths. Dinner could easily be forgotten as far as he was concerned, but the timer on the stove interrupted with a blaring noise. Reluctantly they parted, Ben giving him a cheeky smile. "This is not one of those saved-by-the-bell moments," he said. He patted Ray's chest, fingers sliding down and catching a few buttons before he pushed away to check the lasagna. The aroma flooded the kitchen the moment the oven door opened, and Ray inhaled appreciatively. "That kind of makes up for it, though. Smells heavenly." Family recipe. Ben pulled the lasagna out and waggled his elbow for Ray to put the garlic bread in. "And I'm taking you at your word about the garlic." "Fair enough." Ray slid the tray in and switched the oven to broiler so they would only brown on the top. Ben busied around the small dining room table, pushing his laptop and paperwork hastily into a spare chair against the wall. Then he set up the rack to hold the cooling pan, while he wiped the table off and set the plates and utensils out. While he did that, Ray took the opportunity to finish up the salad. After he tossed everything together, he dug in the refrigerator and found several choices of dressing, and helped Ben put everything out. "Sit," Ben said. He pulled the garlic bread from the oven and slid them into a basket to set on the table. He flapped a towel at Ray, then sat on the adjacent side of the table. "You're the guest. I feel bad putting you to work." "I don't mind working for my meals." Ray refilled their wine. He closed his eyes and inhaled. Nothing beat homemade lasagna. Ricotta or cottage cheese. Ben made a noise between a laugh and a scoff. He used the spatula to cut the lasagna into generous portions and served them up while Ray grabbed some of the salad. "I'm not a heretic." Ricotta. Ray was not a man to fall easily for anyone, but one who could cook would always rank right up there at the top. One bite was all the proof he needed. "I should follow you home every night if you can cook like this all the time." Ben blushed, and Ray thought it was the cutest expression he'd ever seen. And he had dimples. What was not to love about dimples? "I don't do this all the time. I live by myself and there's no reason to eat extravagantly when I'm alone," Ben said. "If you say you normally eat PB&Js, I think I'll cry. This is amazing, Ben. You have a knack for it." I guess that carries over to your shop. All the sandwiches are your own recipe? Absolutely. I thought about getting pre-made stuff, but I never liked the taste of it. I do outsource the bagels and sweet baked items though. Ben waved his fork before picking up his next bite. I don't have the equipment for it right now. Right now. Ray topped their glasses off again, then took a sip. His choice of wine was almost spot on for the mean. He was rather proud of himself for that. Well, I eventually want to expand, but I don't have the money for it. Ray twisted in the chair and pointed to the laptop. Is that why you write? Sort of. I mean, I love writing. It engages a different set of creative muscles. Right now, it pays my utilities and almost my monthly mortgage. Once I can manage all personal bills with just my writing, I'll take my full salary I pay myself from the shop proceeds and start dumping it into saving for shop upgrades. Sounds like you have it all worked out. Ray ate in silence for a bit. What made you write Gay Men's Adventure? They're books I enjoy reading. Not a whole lot of call for it. Ben shrugged his shoulder. No, but times are changing, a little at a time. I was once told to write what I wanted to read. Because if I wanted to read it, then there are others out there who want it as well. I took that to heart. I'm thankful you do. I think I already gushed like a fanboy already over your books. I have every one of them, ebook and paperback. After a long silence from Ben's end, Ray chuckled softly. God, I sound like a stalker. No, you don't. I just don't know how to respond. It's kind of weird. I get emails all the time from readers. Some are nice. Some are really creepy. But I never met someone in person before who reads me. Ben's shy smile grew brighter and his face a little pinker. I don't want to come across as creepy, but I am grateful you do write what you do. Several guys at work read them as well. One of them turned me on to you, and we all shoot the shit at lunch about your books. You have a new one coming out? Ben glanced over at the pile of papers crushed by the laptop. Yeah. Not coming along as smoothly as I'd like. Want a spoiler? Ray set his silverware down and leaned in. Are you kidding? I'll be the envy of the office, having insider information. Rex and Dylan are finally hooking up. He snapped and jabbed his finger in the air towards Ben. I knew it. I knew it. After building them up for 4 books and that time when they were holed up in that villa in Greece, I just knew they had to be a thing. I had hoped it would be a little more subtle than that, Ben said. I'm sure it is to most readers, but I've been pulling for Rex and Dylan since Dylan started working for Comtex. Ray sat back, a sense of satisfaction sweeping over him in a warm wave. Did you have it planned the whole time? No, actually. I was going to originally hook Rex up with Edgar, but I have other plans for him, and that's a spoiler you don't get. After the South Sudan incident, Edgar doesn't deserve Rex. Ben ducked his head. This is unreal. How so? It's just unreal. I mean, I go to work, come home and sit behind my computer and write. While I get feedback for the shop of what's good, what needs improvement, it's usually face-to-face. With writing, it's just reviews. I get the occasional fan letter, but I'm still getting started. I don't have a huge fan base yet. To hear someone talk to me about my book and show that they've actually read it, instead of saying it was good, is a little jarring. Ray dropped his arms to the table. Shit. I guess I did go a little fanboy on you there. Sorry about that. But Ben, he reached across to rest his hand over Ben's forearm. You're a good writer. And you have fans out there. Like I said, almost every guy the first work with in security reads them and loves them. Do you have service experience? No. Never had the chance. You write like a guy who has. That's my sister-in-law's input. She's my main beta reader and helps me get the jargon down. I'm glad it passes muster. Ben grinned and Ray wanted to sigh softly at what a great smile the man had. It does. Military readers are particular about their details. I know. After I got reamed in a review on an early pen name, I knew I needed help. Alice stepped up. Well, Ray slid his hand down to take Ben's hand in his. If you need another, tap your boy here, because I'll be glad to help out. Ben squeezed in return before slowly extracting his hand. Ray was a little disappointed, but they did have a meal to finish. The rest of the time they talked about Ben's plans for future books, possible new plotlines, even spin-off plans. A part of Ray offered up thanks to the universe that Jack stood him up that night. Getting to know Ben was one of the best things that ever happened to him. They finished up dinner, and Ray was ready to sit on the sofa and finish off the bottle when his phone rang. With a heavy sigh, he gave Ben an apologetic smile when he recognized the number. Work. This won't take long. He stood and crossed to the living room window. Collins, he said sharply. Sorry to bother you, boss, Willis, the swing shift supervisor, said. Jonesy's wife just called. He's been yakking all evening. He's at the ER right now, and they think it's food poisoning. Chapter 9. Ben knew it was rude to eavesdrop, so he took his mind off the conversation by using that opportunity to study Ray from the rear. Watching Ray, framed in the window as the evening streetlights cast him into silhouette, he was delicious to behold. Broad shoulders and back narrowing down to a trim waist. Even in jeans, he had that military bearing that all men and women who served and still serve exhibit. A confidence, a bearing that can't be described as anything but authoritative, confident, assured, and so very fucking sexy. It was like Rex had stepped from the pages of his book to appear in the flesh. Ray had said he was disappointed he didn't get a goodnight kiss, and Ben's body lit on fire at the thought. To have that man, standing there like a dream lover, completely surrounding him and claiming him, was foremost on his mind. Talk about inspiration for writing Rex's sex scene with Dylan. Ben knew in his heart that their love scene wouldn't compare to what would be real with Ray. Ben jerked with the realization that he was sitting there watching Ray handle some call from work, fantasizing what sex would be like with the man. He finished his wine to give himself something else to do before he embarrassed himself. Like getting an erection. All right. Check in when Tompkins relieves you for the night shift, Ray said, turning from the window. Ben. I'm really sorry. You need to go. Ben tried to keep the disappointment out of his voice. I totally get it. Sometimes work interferes at the worst time. God knows how many times I get called on the rare days I take off. Ray flopped onto the sofa and took up his wine glass. What? No, nothing like that. I am just down a man at work, so that's going to be a little tricky to schedule around, but it's the swing shift. The shift supervisor is going to try a couple of standbys to come in. If he can't find someone, he'll call me, but most of my guys like the extra hours, so I don't think it'll be a problem. Oh, I thought you were apologizing for having to leave now. Ben relaxed, relieved that Ray didn't have to rush off. He enjoyed the man's company. That was all. And it had nothing to do with the fact that he had actually changed the sheets just in case something happened. Not saying he was planning it, but it never hurt to be prepared. I am apologizing that I may have to leave later, but it's a small chance. Ray draped one arm along the back of the sofa. His hand was in reach to play with the hair at the back of Ben's head in a repeat of the affection he displayed in his truck. The soft touch was gentle, yet the desire built to a fever pitch almost immediately, swirling in his gut in a tight twist of energy. It moved blood to his hips and groin. A deep wrenching desire pulled at him. With a subtle shift, Ben tilted his head to lean into Ray's hand. He sighed when Ray took that silent invitation and scooted closer so he could cup Ben's head. What's on your mind? You were lost in thought when I was on the phone. Ben chuckled, his eyes slowly blinking. Ray's touch kept him grounded, helped him focus his attention on that one point of contact. How did you know that? I could see you in the window's reflection. Ah. Tension eased out of Ben's body as Ray's thumb brushed against his temple, a soothing massaging motion. He was more relaxed than he'd been for months. I was just thinking about sex with you. Wait. No, he hadn't meant to say that. Ben's eyes popped open and he straightened. Rex. I meant Rex. I mean not sex with Rex, but Rex having sex with, the love scene with Rex and Dylan. Oh. You just keep insisting on breaking my heart then. Ben shook his head quickly. I don't get it. You weren't thinking about sex with me? It's all I've been thinking about since I showed up this evening. Oh. Yeah, well, I mean, it did cross my mind, yeah. Ben rose to his feet to retrieve the last of the wine. Let's finish this off. Buy your shift supervisor time to find someone to come in before you're called away. Before Ben could move, Ray had him by the wrist. With a gentle tug, he stepped in to meet Ben in front of the couch. Leave it. If he calls back, and I don't think he will, I should be sober to drive. I can think of other things we can do to fill the time. Oh. Ben's voice wasn't strong when he asked that. The thought of it sent a pleasant buzz through his body. It wasn't his master plan to have Ray in his bed. He genuinely invited the man to dinner to thank him for his help at the shop when the robber came in. He wasn't going to say no, though. With a step, he was standing pressed against Ray's body. Warmth seeped through their clothing. He caught a whiff of Ray's cologne again. It was subtle and very masculine. This close he could see Ray's closely shaven face, and he imagined he could smell the brand of shaving cream Ray used. Like what? Ben asked, out of breath and dizzy from being this close to the man. Like, figure out how to get you past your sticking point in the book. Ray's hand rested at the joint of Ben's shoulder and neck, his thumb stroking over his pulse point. Could he tell Ben's heart was racing? If his pulse didn't give it away, surely the heavy thump of his chest did. Oh, it's just a matter of inspiration. That was a lie. Writing wasn't about inspiration, but maybe Della's roommate had a point. Some actual action might be the inspiration he needed. Or at least to break his celibate streak. Ray nodded slowly in understanding. Inspiration. I can get behind that. We can hunt up some porn on the internet. He ghosted his lips over Ben's, staying maddeningly out of reach. Ben ached to taste the man's mouth, to breathe in his scent deeper until it embedded in his brain, and he would never forget it. It's been a while since I've indulged in inspiration, he whispered. Tiring of Ray's teasing, Ben leaned in, his hand snaking around the man's lean waist. Ray was built rock solid. He didn't have an ounce of fat on him. Embarrassment reared its ugly head when Ben realized he had let his gym membership lapse. He must feel a little doughy against Ray. If the other man noticed it, he gave no indication. Ray's hand slid up to cradle the back of Ben's head, the other sliding around Ben's body to pull them tight together. The rigid line in Ray's jeans were pretty clear. Ben shifted so it aligned next to his fast-developing erection. Just so there was no question, he wanted it as badly as Ray. Pinned beneath the massive man, Ben held on, allowing Ray to drive their desire forward until his orgasm organized and pushed at the edges of his awareness. He couldn't hold off much longer. It all crystallized into one moment of pure bliss, whiting out his vision the moment Ray surged within him with a guttural groan. Ray's shaft throbbed with his release. The pressure of his cock trapped between them and the motion of Ray's last thrusts were enough to pull Ben over the edge. The intense relief of coming buoyed him up on the cloud of realization that he was where he needed to be. In this delicious man's arms. Until Ray's damn cell phone rang. Chapter 9. Ray. The jangle of his cell phone's ring-tone was like a bucket of cold water upturned on his back. He closed his eyes and dropped forward to rest his head on Ben's shoulder. With gentle care, he released Ben's leg, which had been trapped against his body by Ray's shoulder, and exhaled softly. Ben chuckled softly in Ray's ear. At least he has good timing. That's a generous way of viewing it. Ray kissed Ben's shoulder. With great effort to remove himself from the man's warm embrace, Ray pulled out with a hiss before he tipped to his side. His jeans were at the end of the bed where he had to twist and stretch to drag it within reach. He missed the call, but could tell by the log that it had been Willis, the swing shift supervisor. Ben wiggled beneath the covers and sat up to watch him. Ray didn't want to go. For the first time since he left the army and started with Worthington Limited, he didn't want to go into work. For the longest time, work was all he had. It was all he wanted. There was no time for romance, for dating or relationships. It was all the job for him. Go out for drinks after perhaps. Contact old army buddies getting out and trying to help them find employment. Many of those men left the service in a psychological mess. Sometimes even a physical mess. Ray knew he was in a position to help them get back on their feet. But right now Ben's warmth, his humor, his very presence was a balm to Ray's soul. He was lonely, and it was there in Ben's bedroom that he realized he missed having a warm body to wake up next to every morning. With a roll of his eyes to Ben, Ray hit the call button and then shifted to stretch out next to Ben. It was rude to talk on the phone in front of Ben, but he wasn't going to hide from him over business. There was nothing to hide, and it was in that moment when he hit call that he realized he wanted Ben to know everything about him too. "Willis, what's up?" "Sorry to bother you again, boss. Charlie can come in but not until 3. Mids are down a body." Ray blew out a breath. He checked the time. That was still over 5 hours out. Anyone on shift interested in taking on the overtime until he can get there? That's what I wanted to call you about. Since tomorrow night is my day off, I don't mind covering it, but it would put me at overtime. I know how tetchy you management types get with overtime, Willis said with a low chuckle. Relief flooded through him. Approved. Everything quiet there. Like a sleeping baby. Nothing to report. Sorry to disturb you, Ray. I'll see you tomorrow evening. Thanks. Ray killed the call and tossed the phone on the pile of his jeans at his feet. Good news? Ben asked, rolling to his side to press against Ray. Yeah. I don't have to go in. Ray tilted into Ben to pull him in for a lingering kiss. When they broke, Ben offered him a smile that burrowed its way into his heart. He wanted to see that smile. Every morning. Every evening. All the time. Perks of being the boss. Can you pass some off on me? Small-time business owners don't quite get the same perks. Ben sprawled on top of Ray, resting his hand just over Ray's chest. He linked their fingers together to hold his warmth close. That is the downside, Ray agreed. There are times when I feel like I'm meant to do more. Don't get me wrong, Worthington Limited is great to work for. Challenging, but not too much. Low on excitement and high on routine. What do you like to do? Ben lifted to brace on an elbow. On your downtime? Firewatch mostly. And read. I do a lot of reading. I want to see some of the museums in town but just can't seem to get there. Historic tours are fun if you get an engaging tour guide. When I'm not working, I hit the gym to stay in shape, otherwise I can't do my job. Ray huffed out a laugh. Wow, I am the most singularly and interesting person alive. That's not true. Ben leaned over and licked at Ray's nipple, and he sighed at the velvety touch. You're reading my books. I think that makes you pretty interesting. No, your books are what are interesting. And sadly, I have contributed to delaying you getting it finished. Ray pulled Ben to straddle his hips. He positioned his ass to nestle right over Ray's cock. With a shift and with pressure, Ray was hard again. Which was totally the point. It wasn't delayed. This was research. Research, Ray repeated. Did you gather enough material for what you need? Because if you keep rubbing on me like that, I'm going to let you put that research to use in a practical application. Ben rolled his hips to rub against Ray again. I was counting on it, actually. But I need more research for a shower scene, actually. In the shower might prove to be more challenging. It's too easy to lose footing or lose balance. Safety first, Ray said. He slapped lightly at Ben's thigh to get him to move, and he rolled out of the bed to follow Ben into the bathroom. Ben gave Ray a coy smile over his shoulder when he pulled 2 fluffy towels from a small cupboard. I don't think you'll need to worry about that. It looked like Ben was right. The shower stall had just enough room for leverage without sliding around on soap and water. Yeah, but how big is your water tank? Ben started the shower, offering Ray a perfect view of the man's back. He was too tantalizing to not touch. It would have been a waste to allow that perfect back to go untouched. Ray dropped to his knees on the plush bath mat and skimmed his tongue and teeth along the swells of Ben's ass and lower back. A thrill rushed through him to feel the muscles shift with movement as Ben got the shower ready. He was rewarded with a low moan for his efforts. "We'll never get a shower at this rate, and the water will grow cold." Ray said as his hand slid along firm thighs and up to press flat-palmed against Ben's abdomen. One hand slid down to take Ben's half-rigid cock in his hand to coax it to firmness. Ben started to laugh. "Ray, be serious." Ray licked at the small indentation of Ben's back, following it up with a kiss. He gave another firm stroke of Ben's cock. "I am being serious. I'm doing my duty by providing you with more writing inspiration." "So you're my muse?" "Sure. If you need one. If you want to go again, we need to actually get in the shower." Ben's voice dropped into a arousal-drenched low moan that thrilled Ray to his core. It was a delicious sound he wanted to hear all the time. "Don't you know never to rush your muse?" Ray nipped lightly at one ass cheek before he rose to his feet and captured Ben's mouth in a hungry kiss. At first Ben protested, but Ray didn't release him. Ben relaxed and accepted it wholeheartedly, draping his arms over Ray's shoulders as he drew them both into the stall and beneath the hot spray. Chapter 10. Ben. The alarm came way too early for Ben's taste. When he rolled to silence his phone, every ache and strain made itself known. Beside him, the very reason he was so achy scrubbed his eyes and sat up. "That yours or mine?" Ben smiled at the memory of last night. His intention had been just to feed the man. Instead, they ended up in bed fucking until Ben was raw and couldn't handle it anymore. He was way out of practice. "Mine," he said. He swung his feet off the bed and waited to see if his legs would hold him up. Confident they would, he stood and stretched until satisfying cracks and creaks worked themselves out and his limbs were no longer stiff. "Sorry if I got you up before your time." "No." Ray squinted at his cell phone, then checked messages. "I'm up about this time too." "You're a liar. No one willingly gets up at 3:30 a.m. "Then why are we up where there is a nice warm bed right here?" Ben slid on his sweatpants and chuckled softly. He crawled across the bed to place a kiss on Ray's bare shoulder. He was rewarded with a soft hum and a gentle touch on his cheek. "Because I need to get to the shop for a 6 a.m. opening. Not all of us get to make our own hours." Right. I need to head home to change for work anyway." "Where are my clothes?" "Scavenger hunt. They're all over the place. I'll make you some coffee to go." "That would be spectacular." Ray flopped back on the bed, the heels of his hands covering his eyes. Leaving Ray there, Ben headed for the kitchen to turn on the coffee maker. He would whip up a fast breakfast sandwich for both of them while there. The question that lingered with him was the one Ray asked. Why was he there, in the kitchen getting ready to kick this gorgeous man out just to go to the shop? Why was he working himself into the ground? Was it really to keep his shop afloat? If he was honest with himself, the answer to that was no. The shop was doing fine on its own. In fact, Max had a good point. He could hire on another part-time body or two to cover the hours, freeing him up to be the boss and actually manage his shop, and to write his books. Giving him the freedom to actively look for someone to date. Maybe fall in love. His back twinged at the thought. Instead of it being a pain, it was a reminder that he actually did have a man back in his bedroom. One whom he enjoyed being with. Someone who he certainly enjoyed his time in bed. It seemed a shame to let him walk out the door without saying something. "Hey, everything cool?" Ray's voice interrupted his thoughts, and Ben blinked a few times before he gave the man a smile. "Remembering that thing you did with your tongue last night, actually." "Aha." Ray was dressed, much to Ben's disappointment. He searched the apartment for the rest of his clothes, and he sat on the sofa to put his boots on. Even disheveled, Ray was still a nice-looking man. And he was a nice man, too. All thoughts he needed to ruminate on later. Now, he needed their coffee and a scrambled egg wrap for breakfast. He whipped that up quickly and got it ready to go before he took it out to Ray. Not much, I'm afraid, but should keep you upright and moving until you get home. Ray took them. The look on his face was one of surprise. Ben. Thank you. This really wasn't necessary. And this is a nice travel mug. He turned it to see the name of Ben's shop on the side. Ben shrugged. I still have about 50 to sell, so that one is on the house. If you bring it in the shop, you get coffee at half off. I just fucked the owner of the shop into the mattress last night. Surely I can talk you out of free refills? Ray's boyish grin was too much, and Ben started laughing. No. Those are reserved for employees and family. Take your half off and be happy. I could be family, he protested. Ben lifted an eyebrow. Was that a tease or a promise? God, how pathetic was he that he wished it was a promise. When Ben didn't respond, Ray took a huge bite of the wrap, and he rolled his eyes. This is amazing, he said, holding it up. You make these for the shop too? I do. They're very popular. I can see why. He finished his bite and slurped at his coffee. Really, thank you. Ben took advantage that Ray's hands were full, and stepped into the man's personal space. Hooking his hand around the back of Ray's neck, he pulled him down into a fierce, deep morning kiss. Ray wrapped his arms gently around Ben's body, careful to not lose his breakfast. When they broke, Ben caught his breath. Every time Ray kissed him, he managed to steal a part of Ben's soul. He sunk into Ray's very solid presence. This was a part of his morning routine he missed most. Having someone to send off to work. Hate to eat and run, Ray said regretfully. No, hate to feed you and push you out the door. Ben followed him to the door. Ray paused, then took one more toe-curling kiss. I'll call you later, if that's okay. It is more than okay. I'll be looking for it. With a lift of his chin in goodbye, Ray disappeared down the hall. Ben closed the door and stood there, picking up his scattered thoughts. It was rare, he resented that he had to get out of bed early to open the shop. He needed to change that. Despite his late start, Ben had owned his business long enough he could open the shop without having to think about it. Max came in for his shift, and before long Ben was no longer thinking about the empty bed in his apartment, or how Ray wouldn't be there when he closed up in the evening. It bothered Ben that the thought depressed him. For years he didn't miss having someone in his life. He had his employees, his shop, and the characters of his books. What more did he need? The twinge in his back when he bent to get something from beneath the counter reminded him of just what was missing in his life. Someone to his back. Not just literally. A thought that brought a soft snicker. Having Ray's cock in him had certainly brought out the Randy side of him. He had been doing fine without consistent sex, and now that he'd broken his drought, he wanted more. More of Ray, specifically. He was an attentive lover, seeing to Ben's needs first. He challenged Ben's stamina. That was a definite bonus. He wasn't in the shape he thought at first. After the lunch rush, his legs were wobbly and shaking. Like he'd had a heavy leg day at the gym. Leaving Max to mind the front of the store, he ducked into his office to get his administrative work done. First thing on his mind was to create a sign to put in the shop window for part-time help. Once that was taped to the front window, to Max's obvious satisfaction, he pulled his laptop to push through the second sex scene that had been plaguing him for weeks. He channeled his memories of Ray the night before to use as inspiration, and his fingers started to fly across the keyboard. It was right at the point in the book where Rex and Dylan would have their first meaningful sex scene. The one that defined the emotional stakes for Rex, which would carry through the rest of the book. Ben tried not to think about the parallels in his own life. Chapter 11. Ray. After a fantastic night with Ben, Ray regrettably got tangled up with work, and he wasn't able to contact Ben other than an initial text. After that, life just got in the way, and with every notification of a text message from Ben, he tried to remember to respond until another emergency sprung up to get in his way. Ray would have liked nothing more than to build something with Ben. Instincts were so powerful in Ray's life. It kept him alive in Afghanistan. They ruled Ray's life, and when he listened, it always turned out for the better. His instincts told him Ben was a keeper, that he needed to work on getting to know Ben, to try to develop a relationship with the man. Sadly, his life didn't release its control on him to try to talk to the man again, to invite him out for dinner, for an opportunity to see each other again. Maybe Ben didn't want that, which was why his texts grew progressively more terse and short when Ray was able to respond. Was Ray reading more into that than was there? Perhaps Ben really was busy too. He did have a book to finish after all, and it was taking all of his excess energy after running a coffee shop all day to get it done. Ray sat at his desk one afternoon, finger tapping on the office phone's receiver. He should call, even if it goes to voicemail. At least try to reach out to Ben, let him know he was thinking about him. About them. "You're thinking way too hard, man," a voice said from his office door. Ray's head jerked up and realized it was Jack. "Jack, surprised to see you here. I thought Mr. Worthington was going on a trip to Boston this week." Jack pushed away from the doorframe. He pushed the door shut behind him before strolling into the office and flopping in a chair. "It got cancelled. Weather. Some storm is coming up the East Coast and travel will be a nightmare." "What's deep on your mind?" he asked with a lift of his chin. "Not what." "Who?" Ray sighed. He wasn't able to make the call now. "Oh. Do I know him?" Ray shook his head. "Don't think so. He doesn't run in your social circles." "Hey, that's not fair. I fell into that by association. If I had my druthers, I'd be hanging out with you in some seedy bar drinking warm draft. I would have figured Marcus's tastes would have rubbed off by now. Not for a lack of trying. Look, the swing shift is coming in. Go do your shift change thing. Then we're going out for drinks. It's Wednesday, and I still want to talk to you about something that I think you'll like." What Ray wanted to do was go by the shop to catch Ben before he headed home. However, he and Jack had been trying to meet up for this idea of his for over a week now. Maybe he could kill two birds with one stone. "You owe me coffee. Give me half an hour. Think your boss can let you off the leash long enough to hold out?" Jack chuckled. "I've already let him know. He's behind my idea, by the way, so we have that going for us. You definitely have my attention now. If you leave me hanging again, I'll hunt your ass down." Jack held up his hands. "I served with you. I know you better than anyone. I'm not moving from this spot. Go." Ray slapped Jack on the shoulder with his folder and darted out the door. The sooner he was finished, the sooner he'd see Ben again. "I offered drinks and you dragged me here?" Jack stopped in the doorway as he stepped into the shop. It forced Ray to stop suddenly, or he'd run into the man's back. Ray planted a hand squarely between his shoulder blades and pushed him towards a table along the windows. "Stop bitching and trust me on this. Sit. I'll get our orders. You don't even know what I want." In mid-stride, Ray turned and glared at Jack. "I served with you for 6 years. I know the swill you drink, and you've already admitted that your partner hasn't managed to civilize you yet." Jack held up his hands, then motioned for Ray to continue. At the counter, the cheerful young woman from the night of the robbery stepped up to take his order. "Wait," she said, waggling her pen at him. "I know you, don't I? The guy who saved our lives that night when someone tried to rob us." Ray smiled boyishly. "I'm afraid that was me, yes." She leaned across the counter to speak lower. "Afraid? Didn't you hear me? You saved our lives. Come to find out, the guy was wanted on several other robberies, one of which ended with the death of the convenience store owner." "I didn't know that," he noticed her name tag, Della. "I'm glad I was here then." "You and me both." Just off to the side, a figure appeared from the door leading to the back, and Della leaned back. "So what can I get you?" Ben stepped up beside her. "I'll handle this, Della. Go ahead and take your break." "Sure thing, boss." She waved at Ray and disappeared. "You're a hard guy to get a hold of," Ray said. Ben shrugged. Same could be said of you. He seemed colder than last time. Distant. Ray frowned at Ben. The other man wasn't even meeting his gaze. I guess life got in the way. It does that. What are you getting? Ben glanced at the table, then back to Ray. Ray followed his gaze. What did Ben think was going on? Hey. Ray reached across the counter. Something up. The moment they made contact, Ben's shoulders sagged and he rolled his head back. I'm being a dick, aren't I? A little? I mean, I'm really more worried that I was the dick and screwed up somewhere along the way. I wanted to call you, but... Ray waved his hand. It never happened, and I probably should have tried harder. No, Ben shook his head. That's not it. In fact, it's good that you didn't call. I have been ass-deep in the book. It's almost finished. Made really good progress this week, but have hit the final climax and I'm trying to figure out. He broke off and started laughing. Ray smiled. At least he wasn't acting pissed now. Figure out what? It's nothing. I'm sure you didn't come to hear me blather on about my book. Hey. What did I say about never turning down the chance to get advanced knowledge of your books? Ben looked meaningfully at Jack. The work friend that stood me up when we first met. He kept teasing me with this really great opportunity and then standing me up when it came time to actually meet. I finally nailed him down. Definitely not as important as you. My book, Ben corrected me. No. I meant you. Your book also, but mainly you. Ben's cheeks turned pink. Hey, are you going to order or do I need to get you to a hotel room? Jack called from the table. Ray gave Jack a rude gesture which just made Jack laugh. I should do this though, Ray said. Are you closing tonight? Yeah. I finally hired part-time help, and I need to be here for training. Then let me get this done and I'll stick around, maybe. If it's not inconvenient? I'd like that. What's your order before your friend starts eating the napkin dispenser? Ray put in their order, knowing Jack wouldn't be disappointed by anything he got. Other than it being Ben's shop, the coffee and the food were really good. He took their drinks, his fingers brushing with Ben's for that silent jolt of attraction to rekindle into a burning desire. It would be a testament to his focus and resolve to pay attention to anything Jack said. Okay, food is coming up. You won't regret it. Ray handed him his coffee, then took a sip of his own. Jack's eyes rolled dramatically after he tasted the coffee. Okay, whoever this guy is, he's a genius and you need to nail him to the wall if you haven't. Or nail his foot to the floor so he doesn't get away if you have. Wait until you taste his chicken salad. 2. Fucking. Die. 4. Ray nodded at Jack. So what's this idea? Jack took several more sips, groaning in satisfaction with each taste. I'm bringing Marcus here. He'd love it. This is better than that coffee cart swill. That shit's only good for night shift to keep us awake. Are you going to keep milking this until I beg you? Okay. So I was talking with Marcus the other, it's been weeks now, hasn't it? Anyway, I was wondering, aren't you tired of working for someone else? For Worthington Limited. Ray blinked rapidly. Are you trying to poach me from your partner's company? I'm sure he'd have something to say about it. He did, actually. It was his idea. He suggested I open my own security company. You? Running your own company? Ray paused as he considered it. Jack being a boss. Stranger things have happened in life. I could see it. Don't fucking lie, dude. You know as well as I do I'd be a terrible boss. Jack leaned in and jabbed Ray in the shoulder. On the other hand, you're a great boss. Maybe it wasn't socially acceptable to actually agree that he was a good boss. Ray knew that. But working for himself? Having his own company? He shook his head. Jack, I haven't the first clue on how to even do that. That's what the internet is for, man. Keep up with the times, Jack said, punching his shoulder again. There are all kinds of resources to help you get set up. Ray frowned, his thoughts tumbling through his head. The idea was attractive. But he also knew, owning his own company, that he'd be working twice as hard as he did now. That's what it meant to be a business owner. I don't know, Jack. Jack leaned forward. Look, Ray. You're always on the lookout for talent. You've had Worthington Limited hire guys straight out of the services, or you helped find them employment using the skills they already have. You're a driver in giving them a sense of purpose when they get out and find it difficult to adjust to civilian life. Now, you'll have the perfect vehicle to do that more directly. You don't have to fight HR because you'll be HR. I have zero savings, Ray said. We'll bootstrap it. Or I can hit up the guy I'm sleeping with to front the money. A loan or as an investment. Ray, Marcus has the money. Ever since his little brother wanted to become a chef, he's gotten this itch to invest in others. Hell, he was the one who came up with this idea. He'd be on board with bankrolling it. Jack was completely dismantling all of his excuses and objections. You're not letting me get out of this. He shook his head. Nope. It's a perfect idea, and you know it. Your own security company, you have a say in hiring, training, and the jobs you take on. That's about as independent as you can get. It's tempting, I'll admit that. But there's no safety net. That's a bullshit excuse right there, Jack said. He pointed his finger at Ray. Bullshit. You have the experience and the work history. You could get a job anywhere if it didn't work. Even going back to Worthington Limited. Ray's gaze flicked up to watch Ben with his trainee. They were going over breaking down equipment for cleaning. Jack followed his gaze. What's your objection now? He asked. Owning my own business means less personal life. A personal life I am just starting. That was Ray's final obstacle. He wanted to get to know the man better. Spend more time with him. Starting his own business, he'd be one of two people working in this new company, until he could get more guys hired and the business infrastructure to support it. That would bite into his spare time. Ben must have sensed Ray was staring. While the trainee broke down one of the coffee makers, he moved to the case which held the last of the day's baked goods. Picking out a couple of muffins, he walked over to the table. You guys look like the conversation is intense. On the house, he said as he waved at the baked treats. If you want a refill on coffee, now would be the time before we close. Thanks, Ben, Ray said. They shared a gaze. Ben tilted his head in silent question, then smiled. Take as long as you need. You know the routine, he said before going back to the counter. Ray watched as Ben left, taking that time to allow his gaze to linger over Ben's fit body. His pulse quickened at the thought of taking Ben home. Earth to Ray. Jack's voice broke the spell. Ray blinked rapidly before he turned his attention back to Jack. I'm sorry? I said, why don't you sleep on it? Talk it over with, his gaze flicked over to Ben, someone you trust. You don't have to decide tonight, but make the decision, Ray. Don't default into no decision and miss a chance to do something greater in your life. I'll consider it seriously if you assure me that you're in this as well. I'm not going to make this life-changing decision unless I know you'll be there in the trenches with me. Jack drained his coffee, then devoured his muffin in 2 bites. I'm in if you're in, man. He glanced at his watch. I need to jet. Give me a call later this week, right? Ray nodded at Jack as he pulled his phone and headed for the door, leaving him lost in his thoughts. Other than Jack, there were few in his life he could talk this over. Luckily, one of them was right in the building with him. Chapter 12. Ben. Ben's heart lifted when Ray remained behind after his friend left. He hadn't wanted to interrupt their conversation, but it did appear to be quite a serious one. Now Ray sat quietly at the table, picking at his muffin, drinking his coffee and reading something on his phone. Was it arrogant to believe that Ray stayed behind because of him? Probably. It still made Ben feel better. If he were honest, he had been irritated at seeing Ray after a week of stupid texts and missed calls. mostly irritated at himself that he hadn't been trying harder to keep up with Ray. But he had been neck-deep in getting his book finished. Now it was in a digital drawer to marinate for a week before he did his final editing pass to ship it off to his editor. Because he was self-published, Ben's schedule for publishing was a little more flexible, but his writer's block had put him behind. He was successful in putting off the stress while working. But like all things, instead of the stress passing away, it rolled on him in one huge crushing wave after he could relax. And he took it out on Ray. Ray, to his credit, rolled with it admirably. Now, he was obviously waiting for Ben to finish closing. After a week of not being able to hook up, that was one more reason justifying his hiring more part-time help as a good idea. Knowing that Ray was waiting made it hard for Ben to concentrate on the task at hand. This was Kevin's third-day training, and Ben hired him specifically to work till closing. That meant tasks specific to closing out and getting the shop ready to lock up for the night. Seeing Ray studiously reading at the table, it was an unguarded moment and a real view of the other man when they weren't talking. As with all things he'd noticed so far about Ray, even reading there was a quiet intensity about him. There were no wasted movements for Ray. Everything he did was with one thing in mind: efficiency. He sat completely still, except for the movement of his phone as he swiped to the next page. It was broken every so often, as he sipped at his coffee. He felt it when Kevin stepped close. "Is that someone who should get special treatment?" he asked. Ben's head snapped around. "What do you mean by that?" At his abrupt question, Kevin stepped back and held his hands up. "Sorry. Just the way you were looking at him, I assumed he was like a special guy to you or something. I didn't mean to offend." With a breath, Ben squeezed his eyes shut, then waved away Kevin's apology. "No. Sorry. I didn't mean to snap. And yes, I guess you can say he is. He'll insist on paying but comp his coffee." What had taken Ben aback was the fact that Kevin picked up on it so quickly. Was he that easy to read? Was it that obvious? The bigger question was, did it matter if it was? Ben was smitten with the man. The moment they first met, he had been drawn to him. Hell, he just finished a book that turned into an obvious love letter to Ray. Their short time together inspired something deep within Ben, a longing for someone to connect to on such a deep level. He knew it would show in this latest book. Was it love at first sight? While he supervised Kevin cleaning the cooler that held their baked goods, Ben delved deep into his heart. Yes. Yes, it was. Was it reciprocated? Ben wanted to say it didn't matter, but it did. At precisely 9 p.m., Kevin was given the keys to lock the front door. By 9:05, he was learning to count the drawer and how to deposit all the money into the time-release safe. The floors were mopped, and by 9:30, with both of them working, they were done. Ben walked Kevin to the front door and let him out before giving the lock a final twist. "He doesn't learn the security code?" Ray asked from his table. He stood and shrugged his jacket on. "Della will be working the evening shift with him. She can cover that when he's ready. I want to make sure he works out first." Ben shut down the main lights, leaving only the security lights on. "I hope the wait wasn't too tedious. I need to grab my jacket and we can go." Ray followed him to the office and closed the door behind him. "Waiting for you will never be tedious," he said. The look in his eyes warned Ben that something was up. "Glad to hear it. This won't take long. Something on your mind?" "You. All day." Ray's gaze raked over the desk before turning to face Ben. "And maybe if your desk could handle some rigorous activity." Ben barked out an embarrassed laugh. For so long he wanted someone to look at him like Ray was at that moment. Hungry. Filled with desire. He reacted predictably, cock pressing against his zipper. "It's he cleared his throat. "Tempting." Ray rocked back on his heels and tucked his hands into his pockets. "Not tonight." Ben swore Ray looked disappointed. "Not here tonight is what I'm saying. But I have this great bed back at my place." Ben released his breath when Ray's smile was back, even more hungry if that was possible. And not far from here, if I remember right. You do. Let me finish up here, and we'll head there for coffee. Coffee, Ray repeated. He headed for the door. I'll meet you outside. I'm parked just up the block. He waited until Ray disappeared, then looked at his paperwork. It was his routine to get it squared away before he left. Ben wasn't of much in the mind to do it now. The till was ready tomorrow for Max. The rest could wait. Ben grabbed his jacket and keys and killed the lights. They barely made it in the door before clothing started coming off. By the time they reached Ben's bedroom, he was naked and breathing hard. Ray appeared as sexily calm and collected as he usually was. Only the hard press of his dick against Ben's stomach gave a clue on Ray's state of mind. With confidence, Ray took them both to the mattress, bouncing once before Ray's mouth was on him. The kiss devoured, sucked the very life out of Ben in its intensity. When they pulled apart to catch their breath, Ben gazed into the intense gaze of the breathtaking man pinning him down. His eyes were blown wide, pupils wide with the crazy attraction that cycled between them. Fuck, Ben, you are the most incredible man I've ever met. You consume every thought. My head is filled with the ways I can make you happy. Can I do that? Make you happy? You do, Ray. You really do. Ben threw his arms over Ray's shoulders to cradle the other man's head, the short hair tickling his fingers. I could be happier, though. Ray's brow furrowed. What can I do? Just say and I'll do it. Ben raised his head until their mouths brushed. Fuck me into the mattress. The frown melted into a sly grin, and he took another sloppy kiss. I can do that. Panting and sweating, Ray waited out his orgasm before finally pulling out and dropping to the bed beside Ben. Ben immediately rolled and threw an arm and leg over Ray. As they came down from post-sex bliss, Ben lifted to an elbow to catch Ray staring up at the ceiling. Ray. He more breathed out than hummed. Did you mean it? Ray shifted his gaze to meet Ben's, and he lifted a hand to brush his knuckles against his face. The gentle touch to his cheek made Ben smile. Every word. But his gaze darted away for a moment. It's okay if you don't feel the same way. Just know I want to spend as much. Dropping down, Ben silenced the rest of his sentence with a deeply passionate kiss. Ray's hand skimmed up Ben's side and tugged, rolling Ben to sprawl on top of him. I do. I wasn't expecting it either, but it's weird how quickly it happened for me. Ray's brilliant smile washed over him before he pulled Ben down for another breathless kiss. When they parted, Ben slid down enough to rest his head on Ray's shoulder. So what now? I can move in tomorrow, Ray said with a chuckle that vibrated through his chest. It tickled Ben's ear. Ray's fingers combed through Ben's hair, threatening to send him straight to sleep. He was out of practice that one session of sex, and he was done. Ben sighed in a deep contentment he hadn't felt in a long time. Tell you what, we will work out the details tomorrow over breakfast before we have to rush off to our jobs. Ray pressed a kiss to the top of his head. Why don't we both play hooky tomorrow? Stay in? I have something important I want to discuss with you. About my meeting with my buddy this evening. That sounds ominous, Ben said, lifting his head. Is everything okay? Everything is perfect. But I have some decisions to make, and I want to include you in on them. We'll save it for the morning. Ray had just confessed his love. Ben had reciprocated. A brief flare of panic set in. Was this over before it started? With a shake of his head, Ben threw those thoughts out of his head. No. He was just being paranoid about losing what he knew was the best thing that could happen to him. He crossed his arms across Ray's chest and rested his chin on them. I don't know if I can sleep now. Come on, talk to me. It could take a while, Ray said. He rolled off Ray and onto his feet. He held his hand out to Ray. I can still call in to be off tomorrow. Come on. How about some tea and a light snack and we talk? You're not going to let me off, are you? Not a chance. I just told you I love you, so what is on your mind is on my mind too. With a chuckle, Ray grabbed Ben's hand and rolled to stand in front of him. I knew I was making the right choice. Ben lifted to his toes to meet Ray in a kiss that sealed the deal on one of the best days of his life. You're in it for the long haul now, Buster. Chapter 13. Epilogue. Jack groaned from the weight of the desk as he and Ray shifted it across the floor. Here's good, Ray said and set his side down. With a dramatic oof, Jack set his down a little heavier than Ray had. You're killing me, man, he said as he leaned against the wall to catch his breath. You're just getting soft having only one client who cuts you slack. You wanted to make me boss, so that's what you're getting. When I first proposed this gig, I got the impression you weren't sold. Ray shrugged and went to the small refrigerator he had already bought and set up. Pulling 2 bottles of water, he gave one a toss to Jack and cracked the lid on his. I wasn't. Jack snagged the bottle out of the air and followed suit. What changed your mind? I did what you suggested. I talked it over with Ben. So? Jack circled one finger in Ray's direction. I called that right? You did. Score 1 for Jack. Ray threw his bottle cap at Jack. It bounced off Jack's blocking hand as he batted it away. Don't get used to victory, son. We got a lot of work ahead of us, and I'm going to be depending heavily on you. I'm not going to be the only one working my ass off while you scoot off to the Bahamas with your rich-as-fuck boyfriend. My rich-as-fuck boyfriend already has a client list to throw our way when we're ready. There are perks to sleeping with the boss. Have you turned in your notice? Ray nodded as he finished the last of his water. He gave it a toss to the garbage can. Tapped Tompkins to take over as chief of security. Very little breaking in since he already ran the night shift. I'll be out in 2 weeks. Good thing my old boss is also my new boss. No, Jack said with a wave of his hand. We already discussed that. He's an investor, not your boss. And he's strictly hands-off. You're the only boss in the building, champ. So basically he's doing it to keep his boy toy happy? Jack drained his bottle and the empty joined Ray's. Damn straight. I missed working for you, man. You kept me in between the lines. Don't get me wrong, Marcus is the best thing to happen to me. He gave me stability when I needed it. But you keep me sane. Tell me you don't feel the same way. Ben's your rock now, right? A gentle warmth settled across his shoulders at the mention of Ben's name. He is. I mean, we'll both have busy lives and everything. But it's the coming together at the end of the day that is going to make it all worthwhile. Glad to hear it, Ben said from the doorway. He waggled his eyebrows at Jack as he strolled into the office. He sat a bag of food and coffee tray down on the desk. It's coming along nicely. Ray heard the sarcasm in Ben's voice. He strolled over, draped his arms over Ben's shoulders, and pulled him in for a kiss. Don't be mean. Jack's back needed a rest. Fuck you, I'm fine, Jack groused. But the wince on his face when he pushed up from the wall told a different story. Ben took another kiss before he circled around the desk to sit in the executive chair. He spun around in a circle. Weren't you supposed to have some help moving and getting things set up? Yeah. Jack grabbed his sandwich and his coffee before he headed for the door. I'll give Casey a call and see what's holding them up. Then check in with Marcus. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. He pulled the door closed, leaving Ray alone with Ben. Ray held up a hand in a wave before he sat on the desk in front of Ben. So you like the place? Well, Ben circled in the chair again and waggled his head. It's a little Spartan with the decorations. But it's a good location. It's a little further from home than I'd like, Ray admitted. I wanted to clear it with you, but the deal was on a countdown, and the window was short. It's fine, Ben said with a soft sigh. This cohabitation thing is going to take some getting used to. Since I'm starting a new book, I can use the alone time. He scooted forward until he was seated between Ray's legs. Ben's hands were warm as they slid up his thighs to play at the fly of his jeans. And we can make up for it. Ray's eyebrow lifted. Here? Now? Why not? Break in the office right Ben dropped to his knees, then leaned in to cover Ray's rapidly rising cock. He exhaled, warming the denim and his underwear beneath it, wringing a moan from Ray.